the scent struck her first. Champagne fizzing in crystal, smoke from imported cigars, and the faint metallic tang of money changing hands. Beneath her heels, the marble floor thrummed with the bass line of a string quartet, each note vibrating through the cavernous ballroom like a warning. Tonight's gala was more than a celebration. Officially, it honored the arrival of Don Vittorio's heir, Dante Vitale. Unofficially, it was a showcase. Every unmated omega of age paraded before the families, their futures bartered in whispers and sealed with handshakes. Elara Moretti adjusted her sunglasses, the dark lenses hiding eyes that no one here would ever see. To them, she was the fragile omega daughter of a disgraced family, pale, elegant, a curiosity wrapped in silk. But Elara carried herself with the quiet defiance her grandmother once praised, the kind that made men underestimate her at their peril. The gala was alive with pretense, laughter too sharp, smiles too polished, conversations that sounded like pleasantries but dripped with veiled frets. She didn't need sight to know what was happening. She could hear the betrayals in the pauses, feel the hunger in the silence between words, and when she brushed against a passing alpha, the storm of his thoughts slammed into her mind. Greed, lust, calculation. "Stay near the stage, Elara," her sister Valentina murmured, her manicured hand brushing Elara's arm before she slipped into the crowd. Valentina's perfume lingered, sharp and floral, a reminder of her ambition. She had her own alliances to chase tonight, her own future to secure. Babysitting her blind Omega sister was never part of her plan. Elara's fingers found the pendant at her throat, a small silver wolf worn smoothed by her grandmother's hands. Its warmth steadied her. She tilted her head slightly, listening. Thoughts pressed against her like waves, whispered deals, hidden knives, the weight of too many secrets.
Elara's gift was not simple mind-reading. She couldn't pluck full sentences from people's heads like pages from a book. What came to her were fragments, flashes of imagery, half-formed words, the sharp sting of an emotion before it reached the tongue. It was never clear, never whole, but it was enough. Enough to know who lied, who lusted, who plotted. Tonight, the ballroom was a storm. Every step she took pressed her deeper into the tide of other people's secrets. The noise built until her temples throbbed. She paused, cane tapping against the marble, sunglasses hiding the strain in her eyes. For a moment, she thought she might drown in the flood of other people's minds. "Elara!" Her sister's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Valentina's hand closed firmly around her arm, steadying her. The perfume of roses and smoke clung to her as she leaned close. "You'll lose yourself if you linger here. Come, your seat is waiting." Relief washed through Elara as Valentina guided her through the shifting crowd. The storm of thoughts dulled, not gone, but muted, as if her sister's presence shielded her. Together, they slipped past the murmurs and the stares until they reached table 9, tucked near the back. Elara lowered herself into the chair, fingers brushing the silver wolf at her throat. She exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. But then, silence. Not the hush of a room, not the pause of a conversation, a void. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom opened, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations faltered, laughter thinned, and even the string quartet seemed to stumble over a note. The air itself grew heavier, charged with the weight of expectation. Valentina leaned close, her perfume sharp and floral. "That's him," she murmured, voice low, almost reverent. "The Dawn's heir, the alpha no one dares to cross." He entered like a shadow cutting through light. Dante Vitale. Broad-shouldered in a tailored black suit, his stride was unhurried, deliberate, as though the entire room already belonged to him. The cut of his jaw was sharp, his dark hair slicked back with ruthless precision, but it was his presence that silenced the proud. To the families, he was the Don's heir, the man who would inherit an empire built on blood and loyalty. To the alphas and omegas in the room, he was something more primal, dominance incarnate, an alpha whose very aura demanded submission. Ilara felt it before she heard the whispers, where every other mind pressed against her in shards and fragments. His was nothing, a wall of obsidian, impenetrable. The absence rattled her more than the noise ever had.
"Ladies and gentlemen of the families," a commanding voice rang out, not Dante's, but his beta's. The man's tone carried easily over the hush, sharp as a blade. "Tonight, we honor Don Vittorio's heir, Dante Vitale. This gathering is not only a celebration of his return, but a chance for alliances to be forged. Every unmated omega of age will be presented. Let the introductions begin." The ballroom shifted. Chairs scraped softly, conversations died, and all eyes turned toward the polished marble floor that now served as a stage. One by one, women stepped forward. Their heels clicked like gunshots in the silence, each stride rehearsed, each smile carefully painted on. Some trembled, their voices quivering as they offered their names and pedigrees. Others were polished to perfection, gowns glittering under the chandeliers, words smooth as silk, confidence sharpened into a weapon. But no matter how they presented themselves, the response was always the same. "The Vitale heir thanks you for your courage." Polite dismissal. The tension thickened with every failed attempt. Omegas shifted nervously in their seats, alphas leaned forward with predatory interest, and the families whispered behind jeweled hands. The air was heavy with perfume, ambition, and the metallic tang of desperation. Time dragged. Ilara sat rigid at table 9, her cane resting against her chair, her pulse thrumming in her ears. Valentina shifted restlessly beside her, bracelets chiming softly as she crossed her arms. "This is endless," she muttered under her breath. "Dozens of women, and still he hasn't chosen." Ilara barely heard her. A strange current had begun to crawl along her spine, subtle but insistent, as though something unseen had turned its gaze directly on her. The storm of thoughts around her dulled, fading into background noise. The air shifted, subtle at first, then heavy enough to press against Ilara's skin. A ripple of unease moved through the ballroom, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but charged, like the moment before a gun is fired. She tilted her head, letting the storm of thoughts wash over her. Fragments struck like shards of glass. He's wasting time. If he refuses, the deal dies. Push her forward now. Her pulse quickened. Dante Vitale was losing patience. She didn't need Valentina's warning. She could taste it in the minds around her. Restlessness, fear, calculation. And beneath it, a sharper thread, a plan. From the cluster of families near the front, a woman's thoughts cut through, bitter and bright as acid. He'll have no choice. She's perfect. We'll bind him to us through her. Ilara's breath caught. They were trying to maneuver another Omega into his path, a pawn dressed in silk meant to tether the Vitale heir to their bloodline. A betrayal cloaked as tradition. Her fingers smoothed the silk of her gown, the fabric cool beneath her touch. She lifted her chin, sunglasses catching the chandelier's light, the cane at her side a reminder of what she had lost and what she had become. "I won't let them decide this," she whispered, more to herself than to Valentina. Then, louder, steadier than her racing heart, "Take me forward." Valentina stiffened beside her. "Ilara." "I need to." The words cut through her sister's protest, sharp and final. For a moment, Valentina hesitated. Then her grip tightened, and she guided Ilara into the open. The crowd parted reluctantly, whispers trailing in their wake. Pity, disbelief, the sharp edge of mockery. Ilara's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high, refusing to bow beneath their judgment. They stopped at the foot of the stage. The beta's voice rang out, crisp and commanding. "State your name." "Ilara Moretti, daughter of the Moretti line." The silence that followed was different this time, longer, heavier, as though the entire room held its breath. Then another voice cut through, deep and rough, carrying the weight of command. "You're blind." Not a question, a statement. Dante Vitale himself.
"Yes, Don Vitale," Ilara replied, her voice steady, though her heart thundered. His words cut like a blade, low and edged with danger. "And yet you dare stand before me as if you could be my equal?" The ballroom froze. Fear radiated from every corner, sharp and suffocating. Her fingers closed around the silver wolf at her throat, grounding herself. She drew in a breath. "I stand here because I will not let others decide for you," she said, her voice carrying further than she intended. "I know what they plan. They would use another Omega as a chain, a leash, to bind you to their family. I will not allow it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. To speak of betrayal aloud, to expose it in front of the families, was reckless, dangerous. But Ilara pressed on, her chin lifted. "I offer myself, not as a pawn, not as a trap, but as I am. Blind, yes, flawed, perhaps, but mine is an honesty no one else here will give you. If you must choose, let it be me, so their schemes die here, tonight." The silence that followed was suffocating. She braced herself for his fury, for the humiliation she surely deserved. Instead, Dante's voice came softer, though no less commanding. "You speak boldly for an Omega." "Perhaps," she answered, her words honest, "because boldness is the only way I have survived." Then he moved. She felt it before she heard it, the shift of air, the heat of his body drawing closer. His presence was overwhelming, a storm wrapped in flesh. The scent of smoke and leather clung to him, but beneath it was something untamed, wild, like the promise of fire. Her wolf stirred within her, restless, alert, as if recognizing something her mind could not. "Look at me," he commanded. A bitter smile touched her lips. "I cannot." "Try," he growled, his tone leaving no room for refusal. She lifted her face toward the sound of his voice. For a heartbeat, just one, she thought she saw. Not with sight, but with that strange wolf sense that had always lingered at the edges of her awareness. A shadow against shadows, a presence so vast it seemed to bend the very air around him. "What do you see?" Dante asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried like thunder.
"Nothing," Ilara whispered, then drew in a breath. "And everything. I feel your presence, your strength," she faltered, the impression pressing against her consciousness too raw to ignore. "And your loneliness." The ballroom erupted in a storm of murmurs, gasps, whispers, disbelief. Valentina's nails dug into her arm, her fear sharp and urgent. Ilara had gone too far, spoken what should never have been spoken. But instead of fury,
Dante's response was a low, startled laugh, brief, but enough to silence the hall instantly. The sound rolled through the air like distant thunder. "Fascinating," Dante said at last, his voice carrying a new edge, not anger, but something closer to intrigue. "A wolf who dares to speak what others would never admit. Boldness or defiance. Either way, interesting." He stepped back, his presence shifting, as he turned to address the hall. "The introductions are ended. I thank all who came forward." Confusion rippled through the crowd like a wave. This was not how the ritual was meant to end. He was supposed to choose, or at least narrow the field. Instead, he had dismissed them all. Ilara tilted her head, letting the fragments of thought crash against her mind. He ruined it. All our planning. She wasn't supposed to speak. We'll find another way to bind him. The bitterness was sharp, laced with panic. She caught the image of a jeweled hand tightening on a glass, the flash of a young Omega's face, dark hair, painted lips, the pawn they had meant to push into Dante's path.
"Come," Valentina hissed, tugging at her arm, "before he reconsiders and punishes you for your insolence." Ilara let her guide her. Though her mind spun, her wolf stirred restlessly, unsettled, as though it knew something she did not. What had she felt in that strange moment when he commanded her to face him? And why did the betrayer's thoughts cling to her like smoke, promising this was far from over? They were nearly at the doors when a firm hand clasped her shoulder, halting her. The scent of citrus and leather filled her senses. "The Don's heir requests your presence," the beta said, his tone carefully measured. His grip was steady, unyielding. Valentina's hold on her tightened. "She needs me to guide her," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I will guide her," the beta replied, his words final. Ilara turned toward her sister, her honey-blonde hair brushing against the pale silk of her gown. The sunglasses pressed cool against her skin, but she lifted her chin with quiet dignity. Her fingers found the silver wolf pendant at her throat, the worn charm warm against her palm, as if her grandmother's strength still lingered there. "It's all right," she said softly, squeezing Valentina's hand. "Go home. Tell father I've been summoned." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "Tell him I'll be safe." "Ilara," Valentina's voice cracked with worry. "Please." For a long moment her sister clung to her, then her fingers slipped away. Ilara stood alone, pale gown flowing around her, sunglasses hiding her unseeing eyes, pendant clutched in her hand, the beta's steady grip anchoring her as the weight of the hall pressed in. And in the shadows, the betrayers watched, their thoughts like knives against her mind.
The beta's grip was firm, but not cruel, as he guided her away from the murmuring crowd. The marble floor beneath her heels gave way to the muffled hush of carpet, the music of the quartet fading behind them. Each step carried her further from the safety of her sister's presence and deeper into the lion's den. Ilara tilted her head, letting the fragments of thought brush against her mind. Why her? He dismissed the others. This ruins everything. The betrayer's panic clung to her like smoke, but beneath it she caught something sharper, a name whispered like a blade. Isabella. The image struck her unbidden, dark hair coiled in jeweled pins, lips painted crimson, eyes that gleamed with ambition. Isabella Romano, the pawn they had meant to place at Dante's side. The beta stopped before a set of heavy doors. He knocked once, then pushed them open. The air inside was different, cooler, quieter, but charged with the same weight that had pressed against her in the ballroom. Dante Vitale was here. She could feel him before a word was spoken, his presence filling the room like a storm contained within four walls. "Leave us," Dante said, his voice low, edged with command. The beta released her arm and withdrew, the doors shutting with a finality that echoed in her chest. Ilara stood alone, her cane steady in her hand, her pendant warm against her palm. "You speak of loneliness," Dante said, at last, his tone measured, curious. "Tell me, Omega, what else do you see when you look at me?" Ilara drew in a breath. The fragments pressed against her mind. Again, not his, never his, but the echoes of the room, the whispers of those who schemed in shadows. "Bind him, control him. Isabella will tame him." She lifted her chin. "I see a man they fear too much to understand, and I see the chains they would place on you if you let them." Silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Then Dante laughed again, softer this time, but darker. "Interesting," he murmured. "They send me pawns dressed in silk, and instead I find a wolf who bares her teeth." Ilara's pulse thundered, but she held her ground.
Dante rose from his chair, the scrape of it against the floor deliberate, unhurried. Each step he took toward her was measured, the sound of polished leather on carpet echoing like a countdown. Ilara's grip tightened on her cane. She could not read him. His mind was a void, a silence more suffocating than the storm of thoughts outside. But around that silence, the fragments pressed harder, sharper. She's reckless. He'll break her. Isabella was the safer choice. Dante stopped just short of her, close enough that the heat of his body brushed against her skin. His voice dropped, low and edged with something dangerous. "You claim to see chains others would hide. Then tell me, Omega, what do you see when you stand before me now?" Her throat tightened. She could have lied, could have offered him flattery like the others. Ilara lifted her chin. "I see a man who carries power like a weapon, a man they would rather control than follow. And I see that it terrifies them." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, to her shock, Dante chuckled, low, dark, amused. "You speak as though you are not afraid of me." "I am afraid," she admitted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "But fear is not the same as weakness." For a moment, the air between them shifted, not softer, but sharper, like the edge of a blade held just shy of her throat. Then Dante leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Good, because weakness has no place at my side." In a shadowed alcove of the ballroom, Isabella Romano's jeweled fingers drummed against her glass. Her painted lips curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "She thinks herself clever," Isabella murmured, her thoughts sharp as glass. "But she's only bought herself time." Her mother's gaze was cold, calculating. "Let her play wolf. The Vitale heir will tire of her soon enough. And when he does, we'll be waiting." Their laughter was soft, poisonous, and it slithered through the air like smoke, a promise that the game was far from over.
Dante's gaze lingered on her, heavy as a hand pressed to her throat. Ilara could not see it, but she felt it, the weight of a man measuring whether she was a threat, a pawn, or something else entirely. "You speak as though you know my enemies," he said at last, his tone deceptively calm. "Yet you stand here, unshielded, blind, daring them to strike. Why?" Ilara's lips parted. Because I would rather face their knives in the open than their chains in the dark. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Dante's laugh, low, dangerous, amused. Chains in the dark, he repeated, as though tasting the words. You speak like someone who has worn them. Her fingers tightened on her pendant. Perhaps I have. The air shifted. He stepped closer, so near she could feel the heat of him, the storm of his presence pressing against her skin. Then you know what happens to those who cannot break them. Ilara lifted her chin. They die, or they become something stronger. Dante's silence stretched, but it was no longer suffocating. It was considering.
His voice dropped, rough as stone. You've placed yourself in the center of a war, Ilara Moretti. Do you understand what that means? Her wolf stirred, restless, fierce. She lifted her chin, unflinching. It means I've already chosen my side. For the first time, Dante's silence felt like acknowledgement, and in that silence, Ilara knew. The game had shifted. A sharp knock shattered the silence, splintering the tension that had coiled thick between them. Enter, Dante commanded, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. The door opened. Don Vitali, came the beta's voice, Renzo, steady and measured. The commission awaits. Dante's presence shifted, the storm of him pulling back just enough to remind her he was not only a man, but an heir, a leader, a power the families bent beneath. Tell them I'll join shortly, he said. The door closed again, leaving Ilara acutely aware of the impropriety of being alone in the Vitali heir's private study. She rose quickly, her cane steady in her hand. I should leave. You'll remain in the estate tonight, Dante said, his tone brooking no argument. Renzo will escort you to guest quarters. My family will worry, she protested. They've already been informed, he replied. Then his voice shifted, softening, almost gentle. She felt him draw closer again, his presence pressing against her like heat from a fire. Rest well, Ilara, Dante murmured, his voice low, final.
Then Renzo was at her side, guiding her from the study with a steadiness that brooked no hesitation. The Vitale estate was hushed at this hour, its polished marble floors and glass-paneled halls gleaming under recessed lights. He led her to guest quarters more lavish than anything she had ever known. A young woman awaited her there, Lucia, soft-spoken, her voice gentle as she described the space. A king-sized bed dressed in crisp linen, a sitting area with leather chairs, and a private bath where steam curled from heated tiles. The Don Vitale has ordered garments prepared for you, Lucia explained, guiding Ilara's hands across silks and velvets laid neatly on the bed. In the morning, someone will assist you with dressing. When Lucia left, Ilara sat at the edge of the bed, her sunglasses cool against her skin, her honey-blonde hair falling forward as she clutched her grandmother's pendant. Overwhelmed, she whispered into the silence, "Why is he treating me as an honored guest instead of sending me home?" Sleep never came. She lay awake replaying every moment. His voice, deep and rough, his scent of citrus and smoke, the fleeting touch that had set warmth coursing through her, the way he had named her strength with such certainty, and the loneliness she had sensed in him, a loneliness that mirrored her own.
Morning arrived with a knock. Lucia returned, bringing breakfast and offering her help with bathing and dressing. Ilara accepted, letting her guide her through the unfamiliar suite and into a gown finer than anything she had ever worn. "It's emerald green," Lucia said, as she arranged Ilara's hair into an elegant style she could feel, but not see. "Why this color?"
Alara asked, running her fingers over the smooth fabric. Lucia hesitated before answering. The Don requested it. He said it matches your eyes. A strange ache filled her chest at the thought of Dante choosing a dress to match eyes that would never see it. When Lucia departed, Renzo returned. The heir awaits you, he said, offering his arm. Alara expected to be led back to Dante's study. Instead, Renzo guided her through the estate's garden terrace, the air fresh with the scent of dew and roses drifting from manicured hedges. At the eastern fountain, he explained, Don Vitali is waiting there.
The scent of roses drifted from manicured hedges, mingling with the faint hum of water ahead. Her wolf stirred restlessly, already aware of what waited. They stopped. The sound of the fountain reached her, water spilling in a steady rhythm into a wide, modern basin of polished marble and glass. And then the air shifted, thickening with heat and weight. She didn't need Renzo's quiet words to know. "The Don," he murmured. "He is here." Alara lifted her chin, sunglasses cool against her skin, honey-blonde hair brushing her shoulders. Her fingers found the silver wolf pendant at her throat, clutching it as if it could steady her. Dante's presence pressed against her before he spoke. His aura was unmistakable, vast, unyielding, like a storm contained in flesh. The scent of citrus and leather reached her first, undercut by something sharper, wilder, like the air before lightning strikes. "Alara," he said, her name rolling from his tongue with a weight that made her pulse stumble. She could sense him standing near the fountain, tall and broad-shouldered, his stillness more commanding than movement. In her mind's eye, she pictured the expression she could feel in the air around him, sharp, assessing, a gaze that cut as surely as a blade. "You wear the color well," he said at last, his voice low, rough, carrying both approval and something unreadable. Her hand brushed the emerald silk of the gown. "You chose it," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I did." His footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, each one echoing faintly against the smooth terrace around him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fountain's steady rhythm filled the silence, a fragile counterpoint to the storm that was Dante.
"May I?" Dante's voice was low and almost hesitant. His hand brushed against hers, warm and steady. When she didn't pull away, he guided her forward. "The fountain," he said, leading her fingers to the cool edge of polished marble. "Wolves, carved into the stone, running and hunting." His hand lingered as he helped her trace the shapes, his voice close to her ear as he described what she could not see. No one had ever done this for her before, helped her see through touch, deliberately and patiently. "Thank you," she whispered, when he finally released her hand. But Dante did not move away. His silence pressed against her until it was heavier than words. Then at last he spoke. "At the gala," he said, his tone deceptively calm. "You stood when no one else did. You stopped something before it began. Tell me, Alara, how?" Her pulse stumbled. She had known this moment would come. "I heard them," she said carefully. Dante's voice sharpened. "Heard what?" "Their thoughts," she admitted, her fingers tightening on her pendant. "I heard the plot before it reached your table." For a long moment there was only the sound of the fountain, steady and unyielding. Then Dante's footsteps shifted, slow and deliberate, circling her the way he had in the chamber. "You expect me to believe," he said, his voice low, dangerous, That you can read the minds of my enemies? Ilara lifted her chin. Believe what you want, but I heard them. I heard Isabella Romano plan to see you fall. I heard her mother's voice sharpen with it, and I chose to stand. His silence was taut and electric. She could feel the weight of his gaze, assessing, cutting. You risked everything, Dante said at last. Not for yourself, for me. Her lips curved faintly, though her heart thundered. For the truth.
The truth, he repeated, tasting the word. Do you know what it costs to speak it in my world? Men have died for less, families erased. Ilara's grip on her pendant tightened, but she did not flinch. Then let them come for me. I'd rather die for truth than live chained to lies. His hand shot out, catching her wrist, not cruelly, but with a force that pinned her in place. You gamble with your life as if it means nothing. Why? Her breath hitched. Because it was the only way to stop them. Dante's gaze burned into her, unrelenting. Then slowly his grip eased, his thumb brushing against her pulse. Her heart stumbled. Considering me? For what? His answer was steady, unflinching. As my chosen. Shock rippled through her. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. You don't understand. I only did it to save you. Besides, we barely know each other. Dante's silence was sharp, assessing. Then he leaned in, his presence overwhelming, his voice low and dangerous. I want more than what I know, and when I want something, Ilara, I take it. Her wolf stirred, restless, fierce. His hand lifted, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, lingering just long enough to make her pulse stumble. The air between them tightened, charged, the fountain's rhythm a fragile counterpoint to the storm gathering in his eyes. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. Ilara stiffened. Isabella, she's close, too close. Don Vitale. Isabella's voice rang across the terrace, smooth and honeyed, but her thoughts pressed against Ilara like knives. He belongs to me. She'll never keep him. The moment shattered, the near kiss suspended in the air like a blade left hanging.
Dante straightened, the shift in his presence immediate. The storm reined in, his expression unreadable. Signorina Romano, he said evenly, his tone polite but edged. You rise early. Ilara kept her face composed, though Isabella's thoughts still pressed against her like shards of glass. I couldn't sleep, Isabella replied smoothly, heels clicking against the terrace as she approached. She was immaculate as always, raven-dark hair swept into a glossy twist, her crimson dress clinging like a second skin, diamonds at her throat catching the early light. Her beauty was deliberate, weaponized. The estate gardens are soothing. Her gaze flicked toward Ilara, the sweetness in her voice at odds with the poison Ilara could hear. She looks ridiculous in that dress, pretending she belongs. Dante's eyes narrowed, though his voice remained calm. You should rest. The commission reconvenes soon. Isabella tilted her head, her smile practiced, lips painted the same shade as blood. And leave you alone out here, with her? Ilara's grip tightened on her cane, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. Isabella's mind was screaming loud enough. He's mine. She'll never take him from me. For a moment, Dante said nothing, the silence stretching taut. Then he stepped subtly closer to Ilara, his hand brushing hers in a gesture so slight it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. Your concern is noted, he told Isabella, his tone final, but unnecessary. The words landed like a claim, and Ilara felt Isabella's fury spike, sharp and hot, even as her lips curved into a flawless smile. "Of course, Don Vitale," Isabella said sweetly. "I only wished to remind you where loyalties lie."
Dante's jaw tightened, the faintest crack in his composure. "Loyalties," he echoed, his voice low, deliberate. "They reveal themselves in action, not reminders." Ilara felt Isabella's fury sharpen, though her smile never faltered. "He defends her. In front of me. He'll regret it." "I only meant," Isabella purred, stepping closer, the scent of her expensive perfume cutting through the roses, "that the families watch carefully. Appearances matter." Dante's gaze flicked to her, cold and unyielding. "Then let them watch." The words struck like a gavel, final, and Ilara's breath caught. His hand brushed hers again, firmer this time, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of possession. Isabella's thoughts hissed like venom. He's staking a claim over her, over that blind little nothing. Her lips, however, curved into a flawless mask. "As you wish, Don Vitale. I'll leave you to appearances." She turned, heels clicking against the terrace as she retreated, but her mind lingered, sharp and poisonous. This isn't over. She'll choke on the place she's stolen. Only when the sound of her footsteps faded did Dante exhale, the storm of his presence shifting back toward Ilara. "You hear them even now, don't you?" he asked quietly, his voice stripped of pretense. "Yes." "In still you stand," he murmured, almost to himself. Then louder, with a weight that pressed against her chest. "Good. Because if you remain at my side, Ilara, you'll need to." Ilara drew in a slow breath, steadying the tremor in her chest. "You speak as though it's already decided," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Dante's presence loomed closer, the heat of him brushing against her skin. "It is. You've already proven yourself. You stood when no one else dared. You heard what no one else could. That makes you dangerous and invaluable." Her lips parted, her pulse quickening. "Or expendable." A low sound rumbled in his chest, not quite a laugh. "If you were expendable, Isabella would still be standing here." The words struck her harder than she expected, and for a moment silence stretched between them, filled only by the steady rhythm of the fountain. Ilara lifted her chin. "You don't know me, Dante, not truly. You see what I can do, but not who I am." His hand rose, brushing against her cheek, lingering this time. "He see it." "Then show me," he said, his voice low, rough. "Let me learn." Ilara's breath caught, her wolf restless beneath her skin. The air between them tightened, charged, the world narrowing to the space where his mouth hovered just above hers. A sharp knock echoed from the terrace doors. "Don Vitale, the commission is assembled." Renzo's voice carried through, steady and measured. "Tell them I'll join shortly." Dante's tone shifted, cool and commanding once more. Renzo's footsteps retreated, leaving them alone again. Dante's gaze returned to her, the weight of it pressing against her chest. "Tonight," he said, his voice softer now, though no less certain. "Dinner. Just you and me. No commission, no interruptions." Her lips parted, her pulse stumbling. "And if I refuse?" A shadow of a smile touched his mouth. "Then I'll ask again tomorrow." The words lingered between them, heavy with promise and inevitability, as the fountain's steady rhythm carried the moment into silence.
The boardroom was sleek and cold, a long obsidian table stretching beneath a chandelier of steel and glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, its lights glittering like 1,000 watchful eyes. Only a handful of trusted lieutenants lingered at the edges, silent shadows. At the far end, Contessa Romano sat like a queen in exile, her crimson nails drumming against crystal glass, her dark eyes sharp as blades. Dante entered last. The room stilled. He didn't sit immediately. He let the silence stretch, his presence filling the space until even the Contessa's measured poise seemed brittle. Finally, she spoke, her voice velvet over steel. What happened last night was an embarrassment, a ball meant to honor the families reduced to whispers and scandal, and all because of a girl. Dante's gaze cut across the table, cold and unyielding. Not because of her, because of those who thought they could move against me. The Contessa's smile was thin, poisonous. And yet it was she who stood, she who spoke, a blind girl thrust into the spotlight as though she were chosen. Dante leaned forward, his voice low but carrying like thunder. She is not thrust anywhere. She is where I place her, and she will remain by my side. The Contessa's nails stilled against the glass, her eyes narrowed, her words precise and deliberate. You risk much for sentiment, Don Vitale. The families will not tolerate weakness disguised as favor. Dante's expression didn't shift, but the weight of his presence pressed against the room like a storm. Then let them learn the difference between weakness and power. She stays. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. The Contessa's smile curved again, but the smile never reached her eyes. As you wish, she murmured, though her thoughts were knives. You've declared war for her, and wars can be won or lost.
The Contessa rose with unhurried grace, the scrape of her chair against the polished floor echoing like a blade unsheathed. She adjusted the fall of her crimson silk jacket, every movement deliberate, regal, calculated. Her gaze lingered on Dante, dark eyes glittering with unspoken challenge. "Very well," she said, her tone smooth as aged wine. "You've made your choice. I only hope, for your sake, it does not become your undoing." She turned, heels clicking against the marble as she crossed the boardroom. The lieutenants at the edges bowed their heads slightly as she passed, though none dared meet her eyes. At the door, she paused, her profile caught in the glow of the city lights beyond the glass. "The families will be watching, Don Vitale, closely." Then she was gone, the heavy doors closing behind her with a muted thud that reverberated through the silence she left behind. Dante remained standing, his jaw set, his hands braced against the obsidian table. The storm of his presence lingered, but his expression was unreadable. Only when the last echo of her footsteps faded did he speak, his voice low, meant only for the shadows that served him. "Let them watch."
Lucia's hands were gentle as she guided Alara toward the bed where the dress lay waiting. Her voice was warm, reverent, almost hushed. "It's a masterpiece, Signorina," she said softly. "A sleek gown of scarlet silk, cut to flow like liquid fire. The neckline is sculpted, daring but elegant, and the fabric clings to your shape before falling in a clean line to the floor. The back dips low, framed with delicate straps, and when you move, the light will catch the silk as though it's alive. It's bold, powerful, a dress made to be remembered." Alara's fingers brushed the fabric, smooth and cool beneath her touch. She nodded once, steadying herself. "Leave me, Lucia. I can manage." When the servant slipped quietly from the room, Alara dressed in silence, the whisper of silk against her skin the only sound. And when she stood, though she could not see herself, the effect was undeniable. The gown sculpted her like a flame given form, the scarlet silk hugging her curves with dangerous precision. The color blazed against her pale skin and honey-blonde hair, turning her into a vision of contrast, fire and light bound together. The low back revealed the elegant line of her shoulders, while the long skirt skimmed the floor, every step promising movement like molten glass. The silver wolf pendant at her throat gleamed against the red, no longer a simple token, but a declaration, fragile and fierce all at once. She could not see it, but anyone who did would know. Alara was no longer a shadow at the edge of the families. In that dress, she was a challenge.
A soft knock broke the silence. "Ilara," Lucia's voice returned, quieter now, almost cautious. "The dawn has sent for you. Dinner is ready." Ilara's fingers tightened around her cane. The silk whispered as she moved, the weight of the gown both grounding and electrifying. She drew in a steady breath, willing her wolf to still, though it prowled restlessly beneath her skin. Lucia stepped closer, her tone reverent. "You look breathtaking. When he sees you, Signorina, he will not look away." Ilara's lips curved faintly, though her heart thud hard against her ribs. "Then let him look. I've nothing to hide." Lucia guided her toward the door, the faint click of her heels echoing against the polished floor. The corridors beyond were hushed, the estate's usual hum subdued, as though the walls themselves sensed the weight of the evening. At the base of the grand staircase, Renzo waited. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flicked briefly over the scarlet gown, before he inclined his head. "This way." Ilara descended slowly, each step measured, the silk trailing behind her like a living flame. She could not see the effect, but she felt it. The shift in the air, the way silence seemed to follow her passage. Renzo led her through the hall, past the muted glow of chandeliers and the faint strains of music drifting from some distant corner of the estate. Finally, he stopped before a set of tall double doors. He opened them with a quiet push, revealing the low golden light of the dining room beyond. And there he was. Dante sat at the head of the long table, the storm of his presence filling the space even in stillness. His gaze lifted as she entered, and though Ilara could not see it, she felt it, heavy, consuming, unrelenting. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath.
Dante rose slowly, the scrape of his chair deliberate, controlled. The silence stretched, thick as smoke, until his voice cut through it, low, rough, and steady. "Come." Renzo guided her forward, but Dante's presence was already pulling her across the room, a gravity she could not resist. When she reached the table, he moved to her side, his hand brushing lightly against her arm as he drew out the chair beside him. "Sit," he said, softer now, though the command in his tone remained. Ilara lowered herself into the chair, the silk of her gown whispering against the polished wood. She could feel his gaze on her, unrelenting, as though he were memorizing every line of her in red. "You wear fire," Dante murmured at last, his words meant for her alone. "And you do not burn." Her lips parted, her pulse stumbling. "It's only a dress." "No," he countered, his voice edged with something dangerous. "It's a declaration." The clink of crystal broke the moment as Renzo poured wine into their glasses before retreating to the shadows. The table stretched long and gleaming, but only 2 places were set, one for him, one for her. Alara's fingers brushed the stem of her glass, grounding herself. "You summoned me for dinner, not declarations." Dante leaned closer, his presence overwhelming, his words a quiet storm. "Dinner is only the beginning." The weight of his promise hung between them, heavier than the golden light, sharper than the wine's scent.
The first course was set before them in silence, silver lids lifted to reveal delicate plates of seared fish and saffron rice. Ilara's fingers traced the edge of her fork, but she did not eat. She could feel his gaze, steady and consuming, more filling than any meal. "You're quiet," Dante said at last, his tone unreadable. "I thought that's what you wanted," she replied, her voice even, though her pulse betrayed her. A low sound rumbled in his chest, not quite amusement, not quite warning. "What I want is truth, and you've already proven you're willing to bleed for it." Her grip tightened on the fork. "And if my truth doesn't serve you?" Dante leaned back slightly, though his presence never lessened. "Then I'll decide if it serves me later. Tonight, I want to hear it. All of it. Why you risked yourself, why you stood against Isabella, why you didn't run when you had the chance." Ilara's throat tightened. The wineglass was cool beneath her fingertips, grounding her as she lifted it. "Because lies rot everything they touch, and I've lived in enough shadows to know I won't survive another." For a moment, silence stretched again, but this time it was different, not heavy, not suffocating. It was sharp, alive, charged. Dante's hand moved, slow and deliberate, until his fingers brushed hers where they rested on the table. "Then you'll stand in the light with me. No shadows, no lies." Her breath caught, her wolf stirring restlessly at the claim. "And if the light burns," his gaze burned hotter than flame, "then we burn together." The words lingered between them, more binding than any oath, as the city lights beyond the windows flickered like distant stars.
Ilara set her glass down carefully, the faint chime of crystal against wood breaking the silence. Her fingers trembled, but she stilled them, unwilling to let him see the quake beneath her skin. "You speak as though it's simple," she said, her voice low, "as though standing in your light won't paint a target on my back." Dante's lips curved, not in amusement but in something darker, sharper. "It will. But the target was there the moment you chose truth over silence, the moment you chose me." Her pulse stumbled. "I didn't choose you." His gaze locked on hers, unrelenting. "Not yet, but you will." The second course arrived, roasted lamb with rosemary and charred vegetables, but neither touched it. The food was a formality, a stage dressing for the real feast, the clash of wills between them. Alara's wolf pressed against her ribs, restless, fierce. "You speak as if my choice is inevitable." Dante leaned closer, his voice dropping to a growl meant only for her. "Because it is. You've already proven you'd bleed for me. Now I want to know if you'll live for me." Her breath caught, the words striking deeper than she expected. She gripped her cane beneath the table, grounding herself. "And if I refuse?" For the first time his expression shifted, not anger, not threat, but something more dangerous, certainty. Then I'll wait. But understand this, Ilara. His thumb brushed the rim of his glass, slow, deliberate. I don't lose what I want, and I want you.
Ilara drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. You speak of wanting me as though you already know who I am, but you don't. You see what I can do, not where I come from. Dante's gaze sharpened, but he didn't interrupt. He poured wine into her glass, the sound of it soft, deliberate. Then tell me. Her fingers tightened around the stem. My family was nothing like yours. No power, no empire, just survival. My father worked himself into the ground. My mother, she faded long before she died. And me? I was the reminder of everything they lost. A daughter who couldn't see, who was always a step behind, until the wolf came, until I learned I could hear what others couldn't. Her voice faltered, but she forced it steady. That gift didn't make me special. It made me dangerous, to them, to me. The silence that followed was heavy, but not suffocating. Dante's gaze burned into her, not with pity, but with something fiercer. You think I was born into this throne? He asked, at last, his voice low, edged with memory. My father was a tyrant, brutal. He ruled with fear, and I hated him for it. But when he died, the families looked to me. I was young, untested. They thought I would break. Instead, I bled for every inch of respect I hold now. Every scar, every betrayal, every body in the ground, they built the man you see before me. He leaned closer, his hand brushing hers again, grounding her. I know what it is to be underestimated, to be told you are less, to be shaped by loss until it carves you into something unrecognizable. Ilara's throat tightened. And yet you stand at the head of it all. His lips curved, but there was no triumph in it. And yet I stand alone. The words lingered between them, raw and unguarded. For the first time, the storm in his presence shifted. Not just power, not just danger, but something human, something wounded. Ilara's wolf stirred, not restless this time, but steady. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his knuckles. Then perhaps neither of us has to be alone anymore.
Dante's hand turned beneath hers, his fingers closing around her own with deliberate certainty. His voice dropped, rough and quiet, meant only for her. If you doubt me, Ilara, then read me. Her breath caught. Read you? You hear what others hide, he said, his gaze unflinching, the whispers beneath their words, the truths they bury. So listen now. Listen to me. If you think I'm lying, if you think this is a game, then strip me bare with that gift of yours. Her wolf stirred, uneasy and restless. She hesitated, her pulse quickening. And if I hear something I don't want to? Dante leaned closer, his forehead nearly brushing hers, his scent wrapping around her like smoke and fire. Then at least you'll know it's real. Ilara drew in a trembling breath, letting her senses stretch, letting the rhythm of his voice, the cadence of his heartbeat, the subtle shifts in his breath wash over her. She braced for deceit, for calculation, for the cold steel of a man who ruled through power. But what she found was something else. Loneliness, a hunger not for conquest, but for connection. A storm of violence and control, yes, but beneath it, a raw, unyielding truth. He wanted her. Not as a pawn, not as a weapon, as his. Her lips parted, her chest tightening. You're not lying. His hand rose, brushing against her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I told you, I don't lose what I want. The air between them tightened, charged, the world narrowing to the space where his mouth hovered just above hers.
Ilara's wolf pressed forward, restless, aching. She didn't pull away. And when Dante finally closed the distance, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was both a claim and a question, she answered not with words, but with fire. The silk of her gown whispered as she leaned into him, the taste of wine and storm on his mouth, the weight of his hand anchoring her as though he'd never let go. For the first time, neither of them was alone.
The kiss deepened, slow at first, then sharper, as though both had been holding back for far too long. Dante's hand slid from her cheek to the curve of her neck, his thumb resting against the rapid beat of her pulse. He held her as though he could feel the truth of her heartbeat answering his own. Ilara's fingers tightened around his sleeve, anchoring herself in the storm of him. Her wolf pressed forward, not in warning this time, but in recognition, a low hum of belonging that startled her with its certainty. When he finally drew back, his breath was rough, his forehead resting against hers. "You feel it too," he murmured. Not a question, but a vow. Ilara's lips trembled, her voice barely above a whisper. "It terrifies me." His mouth curved, but there was no mockery in it, only something raw. "Good. Power without fear is reckless, but this," his hand brushed down her arm, lingering at her wrist, "this is not recklessness. This is inevitability." She swallowed hard, her chest.
Ilara's breath trembled in her chest, her fingers still caught against the rough line of his jaw. The weight of his words pressed into her, heavy and unyielding, yet there was no force in them, only certainty. Slowly she let her hand fall, but Dante caught it before it could slip away. He brought her knuckles to his lips, brushing them with a kiss that was softer than she expected, reverent in a way that unsettled her more than his hunger ever could. "You don't know what you're asking me to risk," she whispered, her voice breaking against the silence. His eyes never left hers. "I know exactly what I'm asking, and I know what I'm offering in return." Her wolf stirred, restless, sensing the truth beneath his words. "And what is that?" Dante leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, his voice a low vow. "Everything I am, everything I have, my empire, my name, my blood. Stand with me, and it's yours. Refuse me, and I'll still protect you until my last breath. But don't mistake me, Ilara." His hand tightened around hers. "I will not let you go." Her throat tightened, her heart pounding so hard she thought he must feel it through her skin. She had lived her life in shadows, unseen, unheard, unwanted. And now here he was, a man forged in fire and blood, offering her not pity, not safety, but a place at his side. Her lips parted, the words trembling out before she could stop them. "Then I choose." Dante stilled, his gaze sharp, searching. "Say it." Her wolf surged, fierce and certain, and for once she did not fight it. "I choose you." The storm in his eyes broke, not into gentleness, but into something fiercer. Possession, devotion, inevitability. He pulled her into him, his mouth claiming hers again, deeper this time, no hesitation, no question. The world outside the dining room ceased to exist. There was only the fire between them, the silk of her gown whispering as she leaned into him, the iron strength of his arms anchoring her, as though he had finally found the one thing he would never release. For the first time, Ilara wasn't running. She was standing in the fire and choosing to burn. The rest of the meal passed in a haze. Plates were cleared, courses brought and taken away, but neither of them truly tasted the food. Words became scarce,
replaced by glances that lingered too long, silences that spoke louder than conversation. When the final glass of wine was poured, Dante rose first, his chair scraping softly against the polished floor. He extended a hand, steady and commanding, and Elara placed hers in his without hesitation. He walked her back through the hushed corridors, their footsteps echoing in tandem. At her door, he paused, his presence filling the narrow space between them. "Rest," he said, his voice low, threaded with something uncharacteristically gentle. "Tomorrow, the world will demand more of us, but tonight is ours." Her fingers tightened briefly around his before she let go. "Good night, Dante." His gaze lingered on her, heavy and unrelenting, before he inclined his head. "Good night, Elara." The door closed softly behind her, leaving her alone in the quiet of her room. She leaned back against the wood, her chest rising and falling too quickly, the echo of his kiss still burning on her lips. Her wolf prowled beneath her skin, restless but not afraid. For the first time, she wondered if she had found not just a place, but a purpose. Across the hall, Dante stood in the shadows of his own suite, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. He stared out at the city lights, their glow fractured against the glass. He had claimed empires, crushed rivals, commanded fear, but none of it had unsettled him the way she did. Her voice echoed in his mind, "I choose you." He closed his eyes, the words striking deeper than any oath sworn in blood. For the first time in years, the dawn of the Vitali Empire did not feel alone. And yet, beneath the fire of her choice, he knew the truth. The families would not forgive. The war had already begun.
The Romano estate was cloaked in shadows, its marble halls colder than the night outside. In a private salon, Contessa Romano sat poised in a velvet chair, a glass of red wine in her hand. Isabella paced before her, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her fury sharp enough to cut glass. "She humiliated me," Isabella hissed, "in front of everyone. And now he parades her as though she belongs at his side? A blind girl, mother, a nobody." The Contessa's smile was thin, her crimson lips curving without warmth. A nobody who has become untouchable. Dante has claimed her. To strike at her directly would be suicide. "Then what do we do?" Isabella demanded, her voice rising. "We can't just let her win." The Contessa swirled her wine, the dark liquid catching the light like blood. "We don't touch her. We touch what she loves, her family. The girl may be under Dante's roof, but her bloodline is not, and blood is always the easiest to spill." Isabella stilled, her anger sharpening into something cruel. Her family. Yes, break them, and she breaks with them. The Contessa's eyes glittered, cold and merciless. Exactly. Dante may shield her body, but he cannot shield her heart. And when she crumbles, so will his empire. The two women shared a silence heavy with malice, the plan settling between them like poison.
The morning came muted, the air heavy with something Elara couldn't name. She stirred beneath the sheets, her wolf restless, pacing inside her as though it sensed a storm before the first thunder. A knock at her door, too soft, too hesitant. "Signorina." Lucia's voice wavered, the usual brightness gone.
Elara sat up, her fingers tightening on the edge of the blanket. What is it? Lucia stepped inside, and though she couldn't see her, she heard the uneven breath, the way her hands fidgeted against her apron. There's news from outside the city. Her chest tightened. Say it. Lucia hesitated, and in that silence Elara's wolf surged, snarling. She gripped her cane, her voice sharp. Say it, Lucia. The servant's words broke, trembling. It's your family. There was an attack. Your father, your home, your sister. They were all targeted. Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Elara's world tilted. She couldn't see the room, but she felt it closing in, the air thinning, her pulse roaring in her ears. The door opened again, heavy footsteps crossing the threshold. Dante's presence filled the space like a storm. His voice was low, steady, but edged with steel. It's true, the Romanos struck. They couldn't touch you, so they went after your blood. Elara's breath caught, her hands trembling against the silk sheets. My family. Dante's hand closed over hers, anchoring her. Alive, shaken, but alive. Your father, your sister, they survived. I've already sent men to secure them. They will not fall. Her throat tightened, tears she couldn't see burning hot against her lashes. They came for them because of me. No, Dante growled, his grip firm. They came because of me, because I chose you, and now they will learn what it costs to touch what is mine. The words were a vow, sharp as a blade, but beneath them, Elara heard the truth her wolf recognized, not just possession, but protection. She leaned into his hand, her voice breaking. Then don't let them suffer for my choice. His answer was immediate, unyielding. I won't. I swear it.
Elara's breath came uneven, her wolf pacing inside her chest, torn between relief and rage. She clutched Dante's hand tighter, grounding herself in the heat of his skin. My sister, she whispered, her voice raw. Where is she now? Dante's tones softened, though the steel never left it. On her way here, Renzo is escorting her personally. By nightfall, she will be under this roof, where no one will touch her again. Elara's throat tightened, her heart pounding. She could almost hear her sister's laughter in memory, the way it used to fill their small home, bright even in the darkest days. The thought of that light being snuffed out made her wolf snarl, low and dangerous. I need to hear her voice, Elara said, her voice trembling but firm. I need to know she's truly safe. You will, Dante promised. I'll put her in your arms myself. Lucia, still hovering near the door, whispered, Signorina, your sister fought them. She screamed, threw whatever she could find. She didn't cower. She's strong, like you. Elara's lips parted, her tears spilling freely now. She pressed a hand to her chest, as though she could hold her sister's courage there. She shouldn't have had to fight at all. Dante's voice dropped, dark and dangerous. No, that was my failure, and I will correct it. He rose, his presence towering, his hand brushing over her shoulder in a fleeting touch of reassurance. Rest, Elara. Save your strength for her. When she arrives, she will need you whole. And when the Romanos come again, his voice sharpened, a blade unsheathed, then they will find I am not so merciful. Elara tilted her head toward him, her sightless eyes unyielding. Then let me stand with you when they do. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with promise. Then Dante's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tears she could not see. "You already do," he murmured.
The hours crawled by, each one heavy with anticipation. Ilara waited in the grand hall of the Vitali estate, her cane resting across her lap as she sat on the edge of a velvet settee. Her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, ears pricked for every sound, the shuffle of servants, the distant echo of boots on marble floors. Each one made her heart lurch, waiting for the voices she longed to hear. At last, the doors opened. "Ilara," Dante's voice carried across the hall, steady as stone. "They're here." Her breath caught. She rose too quickly, her hands trembling as she gripped her cane. Lucia hurried to her side, guiding her forward. The air shifted, familiar scents, familiar heartbeats.
"Ilara!" Valentina's voice broke, raw with relief. In the next instant, Ilara was enveloped in her sister's arms, the younger girl clinging to her as though she might vanish if she let go. Ilara buried her face against Valentina's shoulder, inhaling the scent of smoke and fear still clinging to her, but beneath it, the undeniable warmth of her sister alive. "Ilara!" Valentina whispered, her voice cracking. "You're safe! Thank the moon you're safe!" "I thought I'd never see you again," Valentina sobbed, her words muffled against Ilara's hair. "They came for us, Ilara. They came screaming, breaking everything. I tried to fight. Her voice faltered, trembling. "I was so scared." Ilara's hands tightened around her, fierce and protective. "You were brave. You survived. That's all that matters." A heavier step approached, slower, wearier. Their father. His voice, roughened by age and exhaustion, filled the vast hall. "Ilara!" She turned toward the sound, her throat tightening. "Papa!" His hand found hers, calloused and trembling. He squeezed it hard as though to reassure himself she was real. "They tried to break us, but we are still here because of him." Ilara felt Dante's presence behind her, steady and unyielding, the storm that had carried them all to this moment. Her father's voice lowered, heavy with both gratitude and pride. "You chose well, Filia. He is a man who keeps his word." Ilara's sightless eyes lifted toward Dante, her fingers still clutching Valentina's hand. Her wolf stilled, no longer pacing, but standing tall within her. For the first time in years, her family was whole, scarred, shaken, but alive. And she knew, with Dante at her side, they would not be broken again.
Far across the city, the Romano estate simmered with tension. The Contessa sat in her high-backed chair, crimson silk draped around her like a mantle of blood. A single candle burned on the table beside her, its flame steady, unyielding, unlike her daughter. Isabella paced the length of the room, her heels striking the marble with sharp, impatient clicks. Her face was flushed, her hands trembling with rage. "They survived, all of them, the girl, her father, all of them. Dante's men reached them before ours could finish the job." The Contessa swirled her wine, her expression calm, almost amused. "You sound surprised." "Surprised?" Isabella whirled on her, eyes blazing. "I'm furious. We should have crushed them, ended this before it began. Instead, Dante parades them into his home like trophies. He's making a spectacle of it, of her."
The Contessa's lips curved into a thin smile. "And that, my dear, is where his weakness lies. He has tethered himself to her family. He has made them his shield, his heart. And hearts are so very easy to break." Isabella's breath came fast,
her fury sharpening into something colder. Then we strike again, harder. We don't stop until she has nothing left to cling to. The Contessa leaned forward, her eyes glittering like shards of glass. Patience. Dante expects another blow. He will guard them like a wolf guards its den. No, we must be clever. We must make her doubt him. Make her question whether his protection is worth the blood it spills. Isabella stilled, her anger giving way to calculation. You want to turn her against him. Exactly, the Contessa purred. A kingdom divided is easier to topple than one united. If Ilara falters, Dante falters. And when he does, the families will tear him apart. The candle flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Isabella's lips curved into a cruel smile. Then let's make her break herself. The Contessa raised her glass, the wine within, dark as blood. To the fall of the Vitale Empire. Their glasses clinked, the sound sharp and final. A vow of war whispered into the night.
The Vitale war room was alive with tension. Maps and dossiers lay spread across the long oak table, lit by the cold glow of chandeliers. Men stood at attention, their voices hushed, waiting for their dawn. Dante entered without a word, his presence enough to silence the room. Renzo followed at his side, carrying a folder thick with reports. They failed, Renzo said simply, laying the file open. Ilara's family is secured, but the Romanos won't stop. They'll come again, and harder. Dante's jaw tightened, his gaze sweeping the table. They already have their strategy. They'll try to turn her against me, to make her doubt. One of the capos shifted uneasily. If they succeed, they won't, Dante cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. Ilara chose me, and I will not allow anyone to make her regret it. He leaned over the table, his hand pressing flat against the map of the city. The Romanos think they can strike at my heart. They forget I still have teeth. From this moment, we don't wait for their next move, we take the fight to them.
Renzo's eyes narrowed. You mean, yes, Dante said, his tone final. We dismantle their network piece by piece. Their allies, their shipments, their safe houses. I want the Romanos isolated, bleeding resources until they choke on their own arrogance. The room stirred. Men nodding, the weight of his command settling like iron. And Isabella, Dante added, his voice dropping to a growl. She wanted to make Ilara doubt me. Instead, I'll make her doubt herself. I'll strip her of every weapon, every ally, until she has nothing left but fear. Renzo inclined his head. It begins tonight. Dante straightened, his gaze hard, unyielding. No one touches what is mine, not without paying in blood. The men dispersed, the storm already set in motion, and as Dante turned toward the hall where Ilara and her family rested, his resolve sharpened. The Romanos had declared war, but he would end it.
Night fell over the city like a blade. By the time the Romanos realized what was happening, it was already too late. Vitale's soldiers moved with precision, cutting through the Romano network like wolves through sheep. Their warehouses burned, shipments seized, and allies who had once whispered loyalty to Isabella suddenly found their doors kicked in, their men dragged into the street. Renzo reported back with grim satisfaction. 3 safe houses gone, their docks are ash, and the port authority they bribed? Ours now. Dante stood at the center of it all, his coat draped over his shoulders like a mantle of war. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of finality. Good. Let them feel the ground crumble beneath their feet. By the time I face them, they'll already be broken. The Romano estate, once a fortress of power, now reeked of desperation. Isabella stormed into the great hall, her fury unchecked. "He's dismantling us. Every night another ally falls, another piece of our empire gone."
The Contessa's calm facade had cracked, her knuckles white around her glass. He moves faster than I anticipated. Before she could say more, the doors burst open. Dante entered, flanked by his men, the storm he had promised now standing in their hall. "You wanted war," Dante said, his voice low, dangerous. "Now you have it." Isabella's face drained of color. Your empire is ash," Dante cut her off, stepping forward. "Your allies have abandoned you, your soldiers are scattered, and you thought you could touch what is mine?" His gaze burned, unrelenting. "You failed." The Contessa rose, her voice sharp. "You think this ends with you walking into my house?" Dante's lips curved into something colder than a smile. "No, it ends with me walking out, and you on your knees." At his signal, Vitale men surged forward. The clash was brutal, swift. The Romano guards fell one by one, their resistance no match for the precision of Dante's strike. Isabella fought, wild and desperate, but Dante caught her wrist mid-swing, twisting until she dropped her blade. He leaned close, his voice a growl meant only for her. "You wanted to break her. Instead, I broke you." The Contessa, cornered, hissed like a serpent. "This isn't over." Dante's gaze was merciless. "It is." And with that, the Romano reign shattered, their empire crumbling in a single night.
The grand hall had quieted after the storm of reunion. Valentina remained close to Ilara's side, her hands still clasped tightly in her sister's, while their father sat heavily in a carved chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Dante stood before them, his presence commanding yet measured. He did not pace or loom. Instead, he spoke with the weight of a man who understood what had been taken from them and what he was offering in return. "You are safe here," he said, his voice steady, carrying through the hall. "The Romanos will not touch you again, but I will not bind you in chains of protection. You have a choice." Ilara's father lifted his head, wary but listening. "I will not force you, but know this. As long as Ilara stands with me, you will never be without my protection."
Ilara's sightless eyes turned toward him, her wolf stirring at the certainty in his words. She could hear the truth in his voice, the vow beneath the offer. Her father exhaled slowly, the fight draining from him. "Then we will stay. For now." Valentina's grip on Ilara tightened, relief flooding her voice. "Together." Dante gave a single nod, final and resolute. "Together." Later, when the hall had emptied and her family was settled into the guest wing, Ilara found herself alone with Dante in the quiet of the library. The fire crackled low, the scent of smoke curling through the air. "You gave them a choice," she said softly, her fingers tracing the carved edge of her cane. "Most men in your position wouldn't." Dante's voice was low, roughened by the weight of the night. "I don't want them to stay because they fear me. I want them to stay because they trust me." Ilara tilted her head toward him, her sightless eyes unyielding. "And me? Do you want me to stay because I chose you, or because you won't let me go?" He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. "Both," he admitted, "the word a vow and a confession. You chose me, Ilara, and now I will never let you fall."
Her wolf stirred, steady and fierce, no longer restless. She leaned into his touch, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't let me burn alone." Dante's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing the line of her jaw. His forehead rested against hers, his voice a low growl meant only for her. "Never. If you burn, I burn with you." The firelight flickered, casting them in shadow and flame. Two souls bound not by chance, but by choice.